I got off work a little later than I meant to. The mill had a shipment delayed by weather again, and I ended up stuck in the warehouse finishing inventory until almost midnight. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the whole street looked drowned in fog. Cedar Valley always gets misty this time of year, but tonight felt different, thicker, heavy enough that the street lights looked like they were underwater. Milo was waiting at the door, tail thumping like he'd been rehearsing it. I barely had time to kick off my boots before he nudged the leash into my hand. I sighed, clipped him in, and stepped back outside. The fog wrapped around us like a cold blanket. Even the house across the street was just a faint, bright smudge. Whispering Pines. Cemetery sits right beyond that house, just a narrow road separating my front yard from the oldest graveyard in town. On a clear day, you can see the crooked stones leaning toward the tree line. Tonight, I couldn't even see the first row. It was all just gray. We walked our usual loop, or tried to. Milo stopped barely 20 feet from the driveway. His body stiffened, his ears perked straight up. For a second, I thought he'd seen a deer or one of those raccoons that think they run the neighborhood. But then he made this low, shaky growl I'd never heard from him before. "What's up, buddy?" I whispered. He didn't look at me. He stared at the fog choking the cemetery. I followed his gaze. At first I saw nothing, just the usual blur of mist drifting over the grass. Then a glow appeared. A small, warm light, maybe the size of a lantern flame, moving slowly between the graves. It wasn't bright enough to cut the fog, but it pulsed, almost like it was breathing. I squinted. The light floated at about chest height, but it didn't throw anything onto the ground. No circle of brightness, no beam, just a hovering glow. For a moment I thought someone was walking with a lantern. Groundskeeper, maybe, or some local teen trying to scare themselves silly before Halloween. But the way that light moved, smooth, steady, gliding, it didn't look like someone walking. It looked like the fog itself was carrying it. Then I heard it. A faint click, soft, wooden, like two carved joints tapping together. I frowned. No wood structures in the cemetery, just stone, iron, and dirt. Maybe a branch snapped. Maybe the mill was echoing weird through the valley. I tried to convince myself of anything that made sense. "Come on, Milo," I whispered, tugging his leash. He wouldn't budge. His paws dug into the sidewalk as if something in the mist was staring back. Another click. A little sharper this time. I swallowed, forcing a shaky laugh. Fog plays tricks, I told myself, but I kept my eyes on that hovering light until it finally faded into the gray, and Milo finally backed away on his own, as if whatever he sensed let go. Most days in Cedar Valley start the same way for me. Cold coffee, colder mornings, and a 40-minute drive to the timber company where half the town works. Cedar Valley Timber Covers looks exactly like what you'd expect. A squat metal building surrounded by stacks of lumber and the constant smell of sap. My job isn't glamorous. I'm a warehouse coordinator. That's a fancy way of saying I move pallets, check shipments, babysit inventory software that crashes twice a week, and argue with truck drivers about why their paperwork never matches mine. It's quiet work. Repetitive, predictable. That's what I like about it. The hours, though, not so predictable. Some weeks I'm out by 4. Other weeks I'm stuck there past midnight because a delivery chain broke down somewhere between Tacoma and here. Jenna hates my rotating shifts, but she's learned to live with them. Milo, too. He's a patient little guy, but when I finally walk through the door at night, he acts like he hasn't seen me in months. Jenna and I keep a simple life. She works part-time at the library, which suits her. She says books make more sense than people. She's probably right. Our nights usually end with her on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, Milo curled against her legs, and me limping in from whatever shift I drew that week. Cedar Valley isn't big, barely 1,800 people, but it feels isolated in a way that goes beyond population. The whole town is wrapped in forest, pine trees so tall and dense they swallow roads, sound, even daylight when they want to. Fog rolls in from the foothills most evenings, thick enough to muffle footsteps. Locals stop noticing it after a while. I guess you can get used to anything if you live with it long enough. Across the street from our house sits Whispering Pines Cemetery, one of the oldest patches of land here. No gates, no fence, just rows of crooked stones leaning into the mist like they're trying to whisper something you shouldn't hear. The town keeps talking about putting up a barrier someday, but someday in Cedar Valley can mean 30 years. Most nights, right before I crash, I take Milo out for a short walk. He expects it. Jenna calls it our midnight patrol, even though the most dangerous thing we've ever encountered was a raccoon that looked like it had seen God. One of our neighbors, Silas, usually has his workshop light on during those walks. He lives 3 houses down, in one of those old craftsman homes with peeling green paint and a porch that sags in the middle. Behind his place is a small wooden shed, his workshop. I've never been inside, but sometimes when the breeze hits right, you can smell freshly shaved timber drifting down the street. Silas is older, late 60s, I think. Tall but slightly hunched, like he spent more years bent over a carving bench than standing straight. He always has a hand plane or a block of wood in his hand, shaping something small. Figures mostly, little carved silhouettes. He works quietly, like the rest of the world fades away when he's sanding an edge or carving a curve. We've talked maybe 5 times in the 3 years I've lived here. I don't avoid him on purpose. I'm just not great at starting conversations. He doesn't seem to mind. On the rare occasions we do speak, he just gives a soft smile and says something polite. Evening, Shane. Cold one tonight. Fog's thick. Harmless stuff, warm in an odd way. But lately Milo's been acting strange around Silas's yard. He'll be sniffing along the sidewalk like usual, and the moment we get near the Merritt house, he freezes. Ears up, tail stiff. Sometimes he lets out this single confused bark, short, sharp, like he expected someone to be there. And no one is. The weird part is, this only happens when the workshop is dark. If the light's on and Silas is out back carving, Milo is fine. But when it's quiet, when no one should be there, he reacts like someone is standing just inside the shadows. I told Jenna about it and she laughed, said, Milo probably smells a squirrel. Maybe, but it doesn't smell like a squirrel to him. I can tell. That wasn't the only odd thing. 2 nights after the lantern light incident in the cemetery, I woke up to a tapping sound at 2 a.m., soft, rhythmic. Not frantic or loud, just steady, like someone knocking lightly on wood from far away. I sat up, listening. Jenna kept sleeping. Milo didn't react, which was strange. Usually he barks at everything. Cars, leaves, wind, his own reflection. The tapping lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then nothing. I tried to convince myself it was the mill. Sound travels weird through the valley at night. You can hear someone hammering a mile away and not realize it. The next afternoon, when I stepped out to grab a package, I noticed something on the porch. A wood shaving, thin as a ribbon, curled at one end like it had just been stripped off with a carving knife. At first I thought it blew over from Silas's yard, but the breeze had been going the opposite direction. And I don't work with wood at home. I don't even own tools besides a wrench set and a hammer with half the handle missing. Still, I told myself it was the wind, or a delivery guy tracking something in. Or maybe I stepped on it last night and didn't notice. You can rationalize anything if you try hard enough. And that's what I kept doing. One odd sound, one misplaced shaving, one anxious dog, tiny things, nothing worth losing sleep over, or at least that's what I told myself back then. The wood tapping came back 2 nights later. I heard it while I was closing the blinds in the living room. Same soft rhythm as before, same steady pace, except this time it didn't sound distant. It sounded focused, like someone tapping on a surface they were studying. I leaned in toward the window, listening. Milo padded up beside me, ears pricked. A tiny knock carried through the fog, then another, then a third, each one softer than the last. Then everything went quiet, a long breath of silence, until I heard a thin wooden scrape, like something small being dragged across stone. I knew that sound from work. When a carved edge meets concrete, you get that thin, gritty scrape, except nothing in the cemetery is made of wood. I tried telling myself it was the mill again, but the fog outside was swallowing everything past the first 3 houses. The mill was almost a mile away. No way it carried that clearly. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning a bright flyer was stuck under my door. Jenna found it and waved it in front of me while I tried to drink cereal out of a bowl because I was too tired to find a spoon. "You see this?" she asked. "Elise Varden is at it again." I took the flyer from her and read it. "Restore Cedar Valley, a new beginning, luxury housing district, community hub, modern infrastructure, Whispering Pines Cemetery relocation proposal." Relocation. Obviously, Elise had been floating the idea since she first ran for office. She always used this language about breathing new life into old ground, which is politician speak for, "There's money buried here and I want it." Most folks hated the idea, but some didn't care, and a handful actually liked it. Jenna shook her head. "People lose their minds when there's money in the picture." "I don't think the dead are the ones asking for a relocation," I muttered. She smirked. "Well, they're not filling out complaint forms." She left for the library and I headed to work. At the mill, everything looked normal. Same forklifts, same smell of pine sap, same half-broken pallet jack that everyone pretends doesn't exist. But late that afternoon, while checking a stack of cedar planks in the back storage bay, I noticed something I couldn't unsee. A small hand impression, not deep, not carved. Just pressed into the sawdust coating the board, the size of a toddler's palm. 4 tiny fingers, no thumb. My first thought was, raccoon. But raccoons don't have fingers like that, and they don't press their hands flat, more like little grabs or scrapes. I wiped the board with my sleeve, pretending not to care. I didn't mention it to anyone. On the drive home, the fog rolled in earlier than usual. I parked, stepped out with Milo, and barely made it halfway down the street before he pulled hard on the leash. He stopped dead near the cemetery fence line. Well, the imaginary fence line, since Cedar Valley never actually made one. He stared at one particular section of the ground, same spot each time now, right where the Merritt family plot sits. A chill moved through me. I didn't want to admit it was a pattern, but it was. Milo wasn't reacting randomly. He wasn't reacting to a smell or noise. He was reacting to a place, and the fog always thickened there first. That night, the tapping returned, then the scraping, then nothing. But when I stepped outside the next morning, a new wooden fragment sat on the porch. Not a shaving this time. A piece of carved detail, about 1 inch long, with a tiny beveled curve like it had been part of a miniature figure's arm. I stood there staring at it, half expecting someone to be watching me from the street. Fog still clung to the road like it had nowhere better to go. Jenna poked her head out behind me. "What's that?" "No idea," I said. Wind blew it over, I guess. But the wind wasn't blowing that direction, and the fragment was too clean, too fresh, not weathered at all. If it had come from Silas's workshop, his yard was down the street, not upwind, and he never left scrap pieces. He was too meticulous. "Maybe talk to him," Jenna said, nudging my shoulder. "He's nice." I barely know the guy. That's how people stop being strangers. I shrugged it off, but her words stuck in my head. That evening, after another late shift, I finally decided to walk down to Silas's place. Not confront him, just talk. His workshop light was on, glowing warm through the fog. He was sanding something when I approached. A small wooden figure, maybe 8 inches tall, its body smooth and unfinished. I couldn't see the face. He was covering it with his hand. Silas looked up when he sensed me. "Evening, Shane." "Hey," I said. "Got a sec?" He nodded but didn't put the figure down. "What's on your mind?" I swallowed. "Just wanted to check in. Jenna and I got one of Elise's flyers this morning." His shoulders stiffened, barely, but enough to see. She's been busy. You're not a fan." "No," he said quietly. "My family's buried over there." He tilted his head toward the fog-filled cemetery. 3 generations of us. I didn't know that. "Most people don't," he said. "Not their fault. Time forgets things faster than we want it to." There was something raw in his voice, a sadness, sure, but something else beneath it, a kind of guarded anger. "You think she'll actually get the votes?" I asked. Silas finally set the figure down. The part he uncovered looked like a child's foot, carved with unsettling precision. "She'll try," he said. "She's got money behind her, influence, the kind of people who think graves are just unused land." Fog curled around his porch steps. Milo whimpered beside me. Silas gave him a soft look. "Smart dog. Dogs always know." "Know what?" I asked. He didn't answer, just picked up his carving tool and resumed sanding, slow strokes, controlled. I stayed quiet for a moment, listening to the rhythm, smooth wood on rough grit. It mirrored the cemetery scraping from the night before. "Silas, have you heard anything strange at night, coming from over there?" I gestured to whispering pines. He paused only for a second, then, "Old places make old sounds." "That's not an answer." He glanced at me, eyes calm but tired. "Some things rest peacefully, some don't. That's all I'll say." I didn't know what to do with that. On the walk home, Milo kept looking behind us, tail tucked. The fog around Whispering Pines was thicker than anywhere else in town, so dense it looked like smoke rising from the ground. A small wooden knock drifted through the mist, then another, then a third, each one a little closer than the last. Not loud, but close enough that my skin pulled tight. Too close. Milo pressed against my leg. That's when the pattern finally showed itself. First came the tapping, soft, careful, never in the same place twice. Then the fog, thickening at the exact spot Milo refused to cross. The fragments always followed, sitting on my porch like they'd been placed there. And after that, the whispers from the cemetery. Every piece of it kept circling back to Silas, to his grief, to whatever he'd been trying to hold together in wood, and once I saw it, that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. Something was happening. And whatever it was getting closer. The fog came in wrong that night. Not thick, solid. Heavy enough that the air felt like wet wool pressing against my face. I'd just finished washing up after a late shift when Milo let out a thin, trembling whine from the living room. Not a bark, not excitement, a warning. Jenna looked up from the couch. "What's his deal?" I didn't answer. Milo stood facing the window, tail tucked so hard it nearly disappeared. His fur bristled. I stepped beside him and pulled the curtain back. Fog smothered the street so completely that our porch light looked like a dying candle, and in the middle of that gray mass, just barely visible, stood Elise Varden, umbrella in hand. Flashlight pointed straight at the cemetery. She moved slowly, sweeping the beam across the gravestones like she expected to find something hiding under them. "What is she doing?" Jenna asked behind me. "Digging for reasons to tear the place down," I muttered. But Elise wasn't alone. 3 other figures lingered near her, silhouettes with reflective vests and clipboards. Developers, inspectors, people with opinions and power and zero connection to the ground they were standing on. Milo whined again, louder. I grabbed the leash from the entryway. "I'm just going to take him out real quick." "Shane," Jenna warned, "please don't get into it with her tonight." "I won't," I lied. We stepped outside and the fog swallowed us instantly. Street, houses, mailbox, gone. The world became a blank sheet of cold air. I made it 2 steps before Milo pulled hard left, not toward his usual bathroom spot, toward the cemetery. "Milo, not tonight," I whispered. "Come on." He didn't budge. His eyes locked onto the fog ahead, muscles stiff as wire. Then I saw it. The gate of Whispering Pines, if you can call a pair of old stone posts a gate, shifted. Not opened, because nothing was moving. More like the fog parted between the posts, widening into a perfect rectangle, a doorway made of mist. My stomach flipped. I looked around, waiting for Elise or her inspectors to notice, but they were further down the road, absorbed in their own flashlight beams. And that's when the first silhouette moved. Small, child-sized, no features, just a darker shape inside the fog. It drifted between gravestones, slow and deliberate, like it knew exactly where it was going. Another shadow appeared, then another. One stepped behind a grave marker and vanished. 2 more slid across the ground as if their feet didn't touch it. "Milo," I whispered. "We're going back." But when I tugged the leash, he pulled forward, hard, growling in a way I'd never heard. The sound ripped through him like pure instinct. More shadows gathered inside the cemetery. 10, 12? I couldn't tell. They weren't walking. They were gliding, hovering just above the earth. Then came the tapping. It wasn't distant this time. It came in close, too close. A quick wooden flick, then another, then a scatter of tiny knocks gliding around me. Not regular, not rhythmic, just restless, like small fingers drumming on different pieces of wood all at once, circling fast, growing tighter with every second. "Milo, go!" I snapped. We darted back toward the street, but the fog thickened ahead, blocking the way like a wall. I could barely see my own hands. Something brushed against my leg. Cold, hard. The size of a child's palm. I flinched and swung the flashlight downward, breath frozen in my chest. Nothing, no shape, no movement, but the tapping kept circling. I tried to breathe, but the fog felt too dense, like it didn't want air to get through. "To hell with this," I muttered and scooped Milo into my arms. The moment I lifted him, he twisted violently, snarling at something behind us. I didn't want to look, but I did, and instantly regretted it. A small shape stood 5 feet away, featureless, round head, thin body, shoulders too narrow, limbs too straight, like a mannequin carved from darkness. It tilted slightly, not curious, more like it was listening. I stumbled back, nearly tripping on a gravestone. My foot landed on loose soil, freshly turned, damp, uneven. Milo thrashed in my arms and slipped free, bolting deeper into the cemetery. "Milo, no!" I lunged after him, and my other foot sank into a depression, a grave, open just enough for someone to fall into. My leg dropped almost to the knee before I caught myself on the edge. Soil gave way under my hands. Something cold brushed the back of my ankle, and panic tore through me. I hauled myself out, rolling onto the grass. "Milo!" I screamed again. The fog thinned for a fraction of a second, just long enough to see him standing at the far end of the cemetery, barking his lungs out at something I couldn't see. I forced myself up and ran, slipping on wet grass, grabbing stones for balance. My flashlight beam cut a narrow path through the fog, bouncing over headstones. Then I saw him. A figure hunched over a grave, moving quickly, hands digging or shaping something in the dirt. Not a shadow this time. A person. "Silas," I whispered. The fog surged forward, swallowing the shape before I could be sure. Behind me, the tapping returned, louder than ever. It rattled my bones, vibrated the ground. I reached Milo and scooped him up. He didn't fight this time. He clung to me, trembling hard enough that his collar jingled. I spun around, trying to find a way out. Everything looked the same, white, endless, directionless, until the fog shifted again. A tunnel formed, a corridor of clear air cutting straight uphill, leading directly to Elise Varden's house, and through that tunnel, the small silhouettes drifted forward, not walking, not running, just sliding through the mist in an orderly line, toward her. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I didn't know what they were or what they wanted, but every part of me screamed that following that path was a death sentence. I turned the opposite way and ran, blindly, desperately. Branches scraped my face, a gravestone clipped my shin. Milo yelped but held tight. The fog behind us pulsed like a heartbeat, like something breathing. I burst out onto the road so fast I nearly fell forward. The fog outside the cemetery wasn't gone, but it wasn't the same suffocating mass. I could see my porch light flickering through it. I sprinted home. Jenna threw the door open before I even reached it. "Shane, what the hell? What happened?" I stumbled inside, gasping. "Close it!" She slammed the door. My hands shook so hard I dropped the leash. Milo crawled under the table and refused to come out. Jenna stared at me like I'd walked out of a nightmare. Maybe I had. "Shane, talk to me." I tried. I really did. But the only thing that came out was, "Something's wrong out there." Before she could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. 3 taps. Even. Gentle. Jenna's eyes went wide. I swallowed, stepped forward, and opened it a crack. Silas stood on our porch, soaked in fog and tears. His breathing was shaky, uneven, like he'd been running, or like he'd seen something that broke him in half. His voice was barely a whisper. "Don't walk into the fog when it calls." Then he turned and disappeared into the mist, leaving his words hanging in the cold night air like a warning I was already too late to understand. And for the first time since moving to Cedar Valley, I realized something out there didn't just exist. It noticed me. The morning after that night in the cemetery, I found another wooden piece on the porch. Not a shaving, not a chip. A fragment with shape, curved, smooth, sanded clean, like it once belonged to something small. I knelt, turning it between my fingers. The grain was familiar. The same tight pattern we get from the cedar stalk at the mill. Something about the curve reminded me of the miniature figures I'd seen Silas holding. The tiny arm the other night. The foot. Now this. Almost like different pieces belonging to the same little body were ending up on my steps. Milo sniffed at it, then backed away with a soft whine. "Yeah," I muttered. "I'm not thrilled either." Jenna walked out behind me. "Another one?" "Yeah." She wrapped her sweater tighter. "Maybe you should talk to him." I didn't want to. But that fragment in my hand weighed heavier than wood should, and the fog clinging around whispering pines hadn't lifted since the night before. Even at noon, the cemetery looked smoked over. So that evening, after Jenna left for a late shift at the library, I walked down to Silas's house. His workshop light was off, no soft glow, No sound of sanding. For the first time in months, his yard was silent. I hesitated, then knocked on his back door. A scraping noise answered from inside, chair legs against wood, and the door creaked open. Silas stood there, eyes sunken, skin pale beneath his beard. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Shane," he whispered, "you shouldn't be here. I need to ask you something." His eyes flicked to the porch, scanning the fog behind me. "Not tonight." "Silas," I said softly. "I saw something out there." His jaw tightened. "I saw figures in the cemetery. Small ones. Kids," he murmured, voice quivering. "Too many kids." I swallowed. "Silas, what are they?" He closed his eyes like that question hurt more than he could handle. "Don't make me say it. I need to know." Silas rubbed his forehead, stepped aside, and motioned me in. The workshop smelled different tonight. Less like fresh-cut cedar, more like damp wood left in the rain. He'd covered all his tools with a sheet. No figures on the bench, no shavings on the floor. It looked abandoned. He sat on a stool and stared at his hands. "You're a good man, Shane. I don't want to drag you into this." "You didn't," I said. "It came to me." He winced, but nodded. So I waited. Quiet, letting the room breathe. Finally he spoke. "My wife," he said, "and my grandkids. They're in Whispering Pines, all of them." "Jenna told me something about that," I said softly. "The ground took them too young," he whispered, "and the ground never gave them peace, not once. I've felt it for years." He looked up at me with eyes that didn't quite focus. "They don't rest," he said. "Not any of them." I felt the room grow colder. "Silas, what does that mean?" His voice broke. "It means when people disturb them, when outsiders threaten to move them. What's held in wood wakes up. It remembers. It reacts." "Wood?" I asked. He gave a tiny nod. "You mean the miniatures you carve?" His face twisted, guilt, fear, grief swirling in a single motion. "The shapes help them, stay together, but I shouldn't have made so many. I thought I was giving them comfort, a place to stay, a place to be whole, but you can't hold grief in cedar. It leaks out, it looks for air." "And you don't know how it works," I said. "Not a clue." He said it with such certainty it chilled me. I stepped back, taking in the empty shelves in his workshop. "Where are they now? The carvings?" He shook his head. "Gone, everyone." A cold pressure sat on my chest. "Gone how?" Silas looked down again. "I don't control them. I never did. I only guided their shape. The rest, they decide." I tried to breathe, but the air felt heavier, thicker, like fog was forming even inside the shed. Outside the window, the mist along Whispering Pines crawled in slow waves, pushing up against the street like it wanted to cross. "Does Elise know any of this?" I asked. "People like her don't listen," he said softly. "They take, and when something pushes back, they act surprised." "What happens now?" I whispered. He didn't answer. So I did. Stupidly, maybe, what my brain always does. I connected the dots, the sounds, the fragments, the fog, the figures, the impressions on the boards at the mill. All of it kept circling the same idea in my head. The sounds weren't random. They were calling something awake. The fragments weren't mistakes either. They felt like bits shaken loose whenever those things moved. And the fog, God, the fog felt less like weather and more like a space they needed, a place they could breathe in, a place they could shape. I still didn't understand why those pieces fit together, but I understood enough to know it wasn't an accident. Something was awake, and it wasn't going back to sleep. Before I could ask more, Silas stood and pointed to the door. "You need to go home. Stay with your wife. Keep your dog close." "Silas." "Please," he whispered. "If I tell you more, you won't survive what's coming." That shut me up. I left with my heart pounding. The fog outside seemed to thicken with every breath. By the time I reached my driveway, I could barely see the outline of my own house. Milo barked softly through the front window, tail low, ears pinned. Inside, Jenna stood by the counter, flipping through her phone. "You okay? You look awful." I talked to Silas. And we need to be careful." She raised an eyebrow. "Shane, please, don't let that man scare you. He's grieving, that's all." But the way Milo paced circles told me this wasn't grief. It was movement, activity, preparation. That night we tried to sleep. But the fog outside kept brushing against the bedroom windows, making soft, sweeping sounds like hands dragging across the glass. Sometime past 1 a.m., Milo bolted upright in bed and growled. Low, continuous. "What is it?" Jenna whispered. I sat up too, listening. Nothing. Then again. A soft creak on the porch, a shifting weight, then the faintest knock, not on the door, on the wall, near the floorboards. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped to the window. The fog outside shifted, parting around the railing like something had moved through it. "What are you doing?" Jenna hissed. "I need to see." "You don't." Maybe she was right, but I opened the front door anyway. Milo shot out beside me, nose low, body tense. He walked in a straight line toward the side of the house, then paused at a corner of the porch. His head tilted, tail straight. He was pointing. I aimed the flashlight. In the mist just beyond the steps, something moved, small, humanoid, drifting a few inches above the ground. It froze when the light hit it, not like an animal, not defensive, more like it was considering me. Then it rose, just an inch, just enough to lift clear off the earth. My breath stalled. The fog around it curled inward, folding like fabric. Then the shape dissolved, literally unraveled into the mist, leaving a faint trail of wood and dust at its feet. Milo backed up, shaking. Jenna appeared in the doorway. "Shane? What did you see?" I turned, still staring into the fog. "Not enough," I whispered, "but more than I ever wanted to." She stepped closer. "We should call someone." "And say what? That the fog's acting weird? That wood is moving?" Jenna didn't answer. I closed the door and locked it. Then I slid down the wall, heart pounding into my ribs. Elise Varden was planning another nighttime tour of the cemetery tomorrow. I had overheard Silas mention it to one of the neighbors. She wanted developers to see that Whispering Pines was unstable, unmaintained, and better off relocated. If she pushed it any further, something would respond. Something already was. I looked at Milo curled against my leg, still trembling. "We can't ignore this," I murmured. "Not anymore." Jenna's voice softened. "Then what do we do?" I didn't have an answer, but as the fog pulsed outside, one slow, heavy breath leaking across the street toward us, I knew one thing. Whatever happened next, I couldn't stand by. And the cemetery wasn't the only thing waking up. It was waiting, watching, choosing, and tomorrow night would be the point where everything tipped. The fog never moved like that before. It rolled in from the cemetery in a single line, a slow river of white, pushing uphill toward Elise Varden's house like it knew exactly where to go. Jenna stood beside me at the window, holding Milo tight against her chest. He couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't blame him. We didn't go outside. We didn't even breathe loud. From our porch, I watched the fog gather around the hilltop like a storm cloud sinking instead of rising. The streetlights disappeared first, then the trees, then the roofline of Elisa's house, all swallowed in one quiet motion, and then the glow started. Not bright, just a soft orange pulse flickering behind the fog, like a lantern being swung too fast. The pulse grew and grew until the fog lit from within, glowing like something burning behind a curtain. Jenna gasped. Shane. I know. Because it wasn't a lantern. It wasn't anything a person could hold. By the time the fire engines arrived, the hill was turning black. What they found later didn't make sense. No electrical fault, no gas leak, no accelerant, no signs of forced entry. Just the charred remains of a room Elise used as her planning office, where she kept the relocation papers for Whispering Pines. She survived. Barely, but her mind didn't. The woman who once knocked on doors with perfect hair and perfect confidence now sat in a hospital bed staring through walls, mumbling about little shadows in the smoke. The project died instantly. No one in Cedar Valley even dared bring it up again. For 3 days, Silas disappeared. House dark, workshop locked, no sound, no presence. When he finally came back, he wasn't the same man. He didn't carve anymore, didn't sit on the porch, didn't even look at Whispering Pines. He walked from house to house, apologizing to people who didn't understand what he'd done wrong. When he reached me, he just placed a hand on my shoulder, nodded once, and walked away. We never talked about that night. Not then. Not ever. Milo still refuses to go near the Merritt plots. He pulls in the opposite direction, tail between his legs, whining in a pitch I've never heard from him before. I stopped trying to make him go. Some boundaries don't need to be tested. For a while, things felt quiet, manageable, almost normal. Until last night. I was locking up when I heard it, a soft wooden tapping drifting from the forest behind our house. Slow, steady, patient, almost polite. I stepped onto the porch. The sound stopped. Fog thickened at the tree line, just enough to blur the world. And on the top step, waiting for me like it had never left, lay a small wooden fragment, the same shape, the same grain, the same clean edge as the first one I ever found. That was the moment I knew, and that's how I realized it never really ended.